It was a quiet Wednesday evening in the suburbs of Montgomery, Alabama, town where most people knew their neighbors and rarely locked their doors. In the Parker household, bedtime came routinely at 9 p.m. 13-year-old Emily Parker, a shy, intelligent girl with a love for books and online games, said goodnight to her parents, brushed her teeth, and retreated to her room. Her parents, Lisa and Mark Parker, assumed she'd spend a little time reading before falling asleep like she always did. Nothing seemed unusual until the following morning. Lisa awoke early, as always, and went about her usual routine, but when she knocked on Emily's door at 7:30 a.m. to wake her for school, she found the room empty. Emily's bed was neatly made, her school uniform untouched on the desk chair. Her backpack sat in the corner, untouched. That's when Lisa noticed the open window. Panic settled in quickly. The screen had been removed and set aside. Lisa screamed for her husband, and they began a frantic search around the house and neighborhood. An hour later, they called the police. Detectives arrived and took note of the scene. No signs of forced entry. No items missing, aside from Emily herself. Her cell phone was still plugged in, untouched, and her journal revealed nothing out of the ordinary. The initial theory was that she may have run away, though her parents insisted. She was a happy child with no history of rebellion. The absence of any leads made the situation more terrifying. Within 24 hours, Emily's name and photo were entered into the National Crime Information Center (NCIC) database. Amber alerts were issued across state lines. Media outlets ran with the story. 13-year-old girl vanishes without a trace. Her soft face, framed by strawberry blonde hair and hopeful eyes, became a symbol of parental nightmares across the nation. But beneath the surface, investigators uncovered something far more sinister than a runaway scenario. When Emily's online history was examined, digital forensic specialists found that she had been communicating with someone on an online multiplayer game for at least 6 months. The messages, cleverly buried and coded within game chats, revealed an evolving relationship between Emily and someone using the screen name Rick_79. Investigators traced Rick across multiple platforms. He had messaged her daily, encouraged her to hide their conversations, and told her that her parents didn't understand her. He used classic grooming techniques: compliments, empathy, shared secrets. He offered her validation and made her feel seen in ways no 13-year-old could fully understand. Eventually, the messages turned to plans. He told her he'd come for her, that they could live somewhere safe, where no one could control them. Emily, like many vulnerable teens in similar situations, had fallen into a trap she didn't recognize until it was too late. Digital trails led nowhere initially. Rick used VPNs and anonymous accounts. The IP addresses changed constantly. Authorities feared they were dealing with a seasoned predator who knew how to erase his steps. They speculated he had driven hundreds of miles in the dead of night, picked Emily up without drawing attention, and had been on the run with her ever since. As the days dragged on, leads dried up. A few grainy security camera images showed someone who might have resembled Emily in a gas station on the Georgia-Alabama border, but the footage was unclear. The car, barely visible in the background, had no plates. Some feared the worst. Others clung to hope. Her parents appeared on national television, pleading for her safe return. "Emily, if you can hear this, we love you. Please come home," her mother sobbed during a CNN interview. Viewers around the country were gripped by the story. Many parents checked their children's devices, terrified of what might be lurking behind friendly usernames and innocent emojis. By week 3, the FBI officially joined the case. Behavioral analysts profiled Rick as someone likely in his 30s to 40s, with a history of abuse or psychological trauma, highly skilled in technology, and likely mobile. They believed he was hiding her in motels or off-grid homes. Task forces were activated, regional alerts expanded, and interstate police forces coordinated efforts. Still, no direct sighting of Emily had surfaced. The most terrifying part wasn't just that she was missing, it was that she could be anywhere, hidden in plain sight, possibly just beyond the grasp of justice. Then, everything changed because of a traffic stop in Ashwood, Kentucky, a town Emily had never even heard of before she disappeared. On the morning of August 12th, Officer Daniel Hayes began his shift just like any other. He'd been working with the Ashwood Police Department for nearly 8 years, and while the job occasionally brought surprises, most days were filled with routine patrols, paperwork, and the occasional traffic violation. Ashwood, Kentucky, was a quiet town of modest homes and long stretches of 2-lane highways. The kind of place where people rarely locked their doors, and kids still rode bikes to school. At 8:57 a.m., Hayes was patrolling the edge of town along Route 14 when he spotted a faded gray Toyota Camry drifting slightly across the center line. He watched as it veered again, failing to signal before making a turn. Nothing dramatic, certainly not criminal, but enough to merit a stop. Hayes flipped on his lights and gently pulled the vehicle over. The Camry rolled to a stop on the shoulder. Without hesitation, Hayes approached the driver's side window with the usual caution, his body cam already recording. The driver, a white male in his late 30s, appeared calm, but had a jittery air about him. He handed over his license and registration with slightly trembling fingers. "Where are you headed this morning?" Hayes asked, in a conversational tone. The man, who identified himself as Richard Allen, said he was on his way to visit his sister in Bowling Green. His ID, however, was from Mississippi. The vehicle registration traced to a woman in Kansas. Hayes found that peculiar multiple states tied to one man who looked like he hadn't slept in days. Then, as he glanced toward the back seat, he saw someone small, hunched over, wearing an oversized hoodie, with the hood pulled tightly around their face. Initially, he assumed it was a teenage boy. The figure was facing away from the window, motionless. Something about it felt off. "Who's in the back seat?" Hayes asked. "That's my nephew," Richard replied quickly. "He's tired. We were driving all night." Hayes peered more closely. "Mind having him pull down the hood for me?" Richard hesitated for just a second, barely noticeable, but enough to trigger a gut feeling. "He's just asleep. Do I have to wake him?" "Yes, sir, please." The figure stirred slowly, and as the hood slipped back, a pale face appeared. Hayes's breath caught. It was not a boy. It was a girl, young, visibly distressed, with tear-swollen eyes that darted between the officer and the driver. Her lips trembled. She looked like she hadn't bathed in days. The air in the car seemed thick with fear. "What's your name, sweetheart?" Hayes asked gently. The girl didn't answer. Richard spoke up instead, a little too quickly. "She's shy. She doesn't talk to strangers." But Hayes had already begun to suspect something was terribly wrong. He calmly stepped back and radioed for backup. Another patrol car was dispatched immediately. Hayes returned to the vehicle and asked Richard to step out. The man did so reluctantly. Hayes separated him from the girl and engaged her directly once more, away from the driver's earshot. This time, the girl whispered just loud enough to be heard, "Emily." Hayes froze. The name clicked instantly. Emily Parker. He'd seen her face on his department bulletin board just 2 days earlier during a multi-state missing persons briefing. "Emily Parker?" he asked carefully. She gave a small nod. Her eyes welled with tears. Richard was quickly detained without resistance. When backup arrived, Emily was escorted to a cruiser where a female officer comforted her. She was dehydrated, hungry, and scared but safe. Hayes notified dispatch. Confirmed ID on missing juvenile Emily Parker, age 13. Subject in custody. Repeat, we've found Emily Parker. The message echoed through radio channels and into the hearts of officers hundreds of miles away who had been searching for weeks. At the station, Richard Allen maintained a calm demeanor during initial questioning. He stuck to his story. Emily was his niece. They were traveling to see family, and she had permission from her mother. But Emily, after a few moments of reassurance and safety, began to open up. She described how she met Richard online through a video game chat, how he gradually became her friend, then boyfriend. He sent her gifts, virtual and physical. He told her stories about how unhappy he was, how they were meant to be together, how her parents didn't understand her. Eventually, he convinced her to sneak out. He instructed her to leave her phone behind, remove the window screen, and bring nothing that could track her. He promised a better life. Instead, they bounced from motel to motel, always checking in under fake names, often staying just one night before moving again. Emily was not allowed to contact anyone. Richard took her photos, told her to lie about her age, and threatened her if she tried to leave. The truth chilled every officer who heard it. A simple traffic stop initiated for a turn signal violation uncovered the nightmare that authorities feared most: an abducted child, groomed online, and stolen away from her home, hiding in plain sight on a Kentucky highway. Officer Hayes was shaken, but relieved. It was instinct, he said in a later interview. Something just didn't sit right, and thank God we followed up. The car was impounded, and Richard's electronics seized for evidence. Investigators suspected he might have been preparing to cross into another state or possibly even head toward the Canadian border. Had Hayes let him go, Emily could have vanished forever. At the Ashwood Police Department, Richard Allen sat handcuffed in interview room 2. His eyes were cool, calculating. He leaned back in his chair as if this were nothing more than a misunderstanding. "You've got it all wrong," he repeated. "For the third time, I was just helping her. She told me her parents were abusive. I saved her." Detectives weren't buying it. Across the building, in a quiet room designed for trauma interviews, Emily Parker sat with a female officer and a child psychologist. She clutched a paper cup of water and picked nervously at the hem of her hoodie. It took time and gentle reassurance, but slowly, Emily began to open up. The story that unfolded was every parent's nightmare. Emily met Richard online through a multiplayer fantasy game. She was 12 when they first interacted. He introduced himself simply as Rick. At first, he was just another player who complimented her skills in-game. But within weeks, he became a regular presence. He remembered details about her life, asked about her day, and made her feel important. He praised her intelligence and sensitivity, even saying things like, "You're more mature than most girls your age." It felt like friendship until it wasn. Single quotes to Richard had hurt him as a child, and that he could tell her parents were the same. "You don't need to be around people who don't love you," he wrote in one message. "You deserve someone who gets you." Over time, his tone became more intense. He encouraged Emily to keep their chats secret. He sent her digital gifts, game tokens, playlists, poems he claimed to have written. Eventually, he began expressing, "Love, you're my soulmate," he typed. "One day, we'll be together." As she neared her 13th birthday, Richard changed tactics. He started sending her articles about kids who ran away and were better off. He asked her to imagine a life away from her strict parents. Then, he began testing boundaries, first asking her to send a voice note, then a picture. Emily admitted she complied at first, nervously, then regularly. He used those images as leverage, reminding her he trusted her and expected the same. About a month before her disappearance, Richard began planning. He asked Emily questions like whether her bedroom had an alarm, where her parents kept spare keys, and if she had a window that opened to the backyard. He told her to leave her phone behind because it could be tracked. On the night she left, he instructed her to pack nothing, just to wear her hoodie and sneakers and wait behind the backyard fence at 2:00 a.m. in his car. He acted loving at first. He bought her fast food and told her how brave she was. But his demeanor changed quickly. He kept the windows covered with sunshades. He took her shoelaces and made her wear baggy clothes. When they stopped at gas stations, he made her keep her head down and told clerks she was his autistic niece who didn't speak. They stayed in dingy motels, always paying in cash. Richard kept a burner phone and warned her never to talk to strangers. If she cried, he accused her of being ungrateful. Emily said she didn't know what would have happened next. "I thought I was going to die there," she whispered. Back in the interrogation room, officers pressed Richard harder. His lies began to unravel. He claimed to be a family friend, then a distant cousin. When confronted with Emily's real identity, he shifted blame. "She asked me to take her," he said. "I didn't force anything." But forensic analysts were already sifting through his devices, and what they found left no doubt. On Richard's laptop and burner phone, they uncovered thousands of messages across multiple platforms. He had dozens of online personas, some posing as teens, others as mentors, always hunting for vulnerable children. He used image editors to appear younger, employed language typical of teenagers, and frequently cycled usernames and profile pictures to avoid detection. In many chats, he rehearsed scenarios where the child would lie to police, told them what to say if questioned, and provided fake names to memorize. Emily was not his first victim only, the first to be found. Law enforcement located chat histories with at least 5 other minors across 4 states. While none had disappeared like Emily, several had stopped replying just before agreeing to meet Richard in person. The FBI stepped in with cybercrime experts who identified similar grooming patterns dating back nearly 4 years. Richard had been operating in plain sight, hopping across online games, chat rooms, and forums with frightening efficiency. Parents from across the country began contacting local police departments after hearing Emily's story on the news. Some recognized Rick_79 from their children's blocked contact lists. Others found disturbing messages on devices they'd never previously checked. As evidence mounted, prosecutors moved swiftly. Richard Allen was charged with kidnapping, child enticement across state lines, possession of illegal images of a minor, and obstruction of justice. Federal charges followed, ensuring he would remain in custody without bail. Emily's rescue made national headlines, but behind the media coverage was a shaken young girl, grappling with the enormity of what she'd survived. Her parents were grateful, but devastated by the depth of the manipulation. "We thought we were doing everything right," Mark Parker said. "We had parental controls, checked her screen time, but we never imagined this." As for Officer Hayes, his instincts and diligence had saved a life. When asked how he spotted something most would have missed, he simply replied, "The girl's eyes. That wasn't just a shy kid. That was a silent scream for help." As investigators delved deeper into Richard Allen's digital life, they uncovered a terrifying and well-hidden trail of predatory behavior that spanned multiple years, platforms, and states. What initially appeared to be the impulsive actions of a single predator soon evolved into something far more disturbing, a methodical and calculated system designed to target, manipulate, and eventually isolate vulnerable young girls. The search began with Richard's confiscated electronics. His personal laptop, cold and slow, seemed almost innocent at first glance. But once forensic analysts from the FBI's Child Exploitation Task Force began their deep scan, the device revealed a trove of encrypted folders, password-protected documents, and custom scripts written to wipe metadata from files. Hidden behind fake utilities and disguised file names were chat logs, photos, and data files cataloging his conversations with dozens of young girls. Each one had a folder, some labeled with initials, others with nicknames only Richard would understand. Most of the interactions followed the same pattern: initial contact through a multiplayer game or forum, casual conversations about shared interests, then a slow but deliberate transition into more personal territory. He asked about their families, their fears, and most tellingly, whether they ever felt misunderstood or alone. For the children who opened up, Richard became their safe place. He used words like special, unique, and chosen. He built emotional dependence, often posing as a slightly older teen or a peer who understood what they were going through. The FBI tracked at least 14 usernames used by Richard over a 4-year period. He had accounts on gaming platforms, teen advice forums, anonymous chat apps, and even educational platforms where he pretended to be a tutor. He was always changing email addresses, rotating through VPN servers to hide his IP, and wiping cookies and history with meticulous attention to detail. What truly shocked agents was how carefully he covered his tracks. Each time he sensed a child becoming hesitant or suspicious, he backed off and disappeared, only to reappear later under a different name. In several instances, he even warned his victims about dangerous people online, training them to trust only him. His grooming was psychological warfare. Agents also discovered he had been creating fake emergency scenarios to bait responses. For example, he would pretend to be a runaway himself and ask girls to help him find a place to hide. He claimed he had been abused by his family and was now on the run from police. Once the child responded with sympathy, he would reverse the situation, saying he could help them escape if they ever felt scared. It was a manipulative dance, and Richard choreographed every step. Investigators uncovered that Richard had maintained a rotation of burner phones, prepaid debit cards, and email aliases. His preferred motels were independently owned businesses that didn't require ID if paid in cash. Several managers later told authorities they remembered him, often arriving late and checking out before dawn. They described him as polite but private, always keeping the "do not disturb" sign on the door. Surveillance footage collected from these motels confirmed that Emily had been with him the entire time. In the earliest footage, she appeared withdrawn, but not panicked. By the second week, however, her demeanor changed. In one video from a roadside motel in Tennessee, she walked 10 feet behind Richard, arms crossed, head down, her movements sluggish and hesitant. Experts later explained that Emily was displaying classic signs of trauma bonding, also known as Stockholm Syndrome, where a victim, confused and emotionally overwhelmed, begins identifying with their captor. One particularly chilling discovery came from a hidden USB flash drive found inside the car's air vent. It contained a folder titled Next Steps. Inside was a loosely written document detailing plans to alter Emily's appearance, including notes about dyeing her hair, ordering colored contact lenses, and buying new clothes. There were screenshots of Canadian border crossing procedures, and maps outlining back roads to avoid interstate checkpoints. In one folder was a series of altered fake IDs images Richard had generated using online tools. One of them showed Emily's face with the name Amy Stevens, aged 16. Authorities realized they had intercepted Richard just in time. If not for Officer Hayes' stop, Emily could have been driven across the border, given a new identity, and possibly lost for years if not forever. There were also indications he had done this before, or had been preparing to do so with other children. Some of the chat logs suggested he was grooming more than one girl simultaneously, perhaps waiting to decide who to take next. Meanwhile, the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children, NCMEC, began cross-referencing Richard's usernames with other open cases. Several parents from around the country came forward, sharing screenshots and messages eerily similar to Emily's experience. Though none of their children had been taken, many had suffered emotional damage. Some were in therapy. Others had withdrawn socially, ashamed of having trusted someone who never existed. As news of the investigation spread, it sparked public outrage. Commentators on social media and talk shows demanded stricter regulation of online platforms. How could a predator operate so openly for years without detection? Where were the moderators? What protections were in place? But as cybersecurity experts explained, the internet was vast and predators, like Richard, were master manipulators. They didn't need to hack systems, they hacked emotions. They found cracks in children's self-esteem and widened them with reassurance and attention. By the end of the 4th week, after Emily's rescue, law enforcement had built an airtight case. Richard Allen would be charged with over a dozen federal offenses, including interstate kidnapping, sexual exploitation of a minor, possession and distribution of illicit materials, and identity fraud. Prosecutors announced they would seek the maximum penalty under the law, possibly life imprisonment without parole. For investigators, the mission wasn't just to convict Richard. It was to trace every victim he had ever contacted, to ensure no child was left in silence, and to shut down every platform he used to prey on the innocent. But for Emily, the most important part was simpler. She was going home, and thanks to one officer's instincts and one mistake Richard didn't foresee, a simple missed turn signal, her story didn't end in the shadows. The news of Emily Parker's recovery spread across the country like wildfire. Within hours of the press release from the Ashwood Police Department, her face was once again plastered on television screens, but this time with a new headline: Missing 13-year-old girl found alive during routine traffic stop. It was a rare miracle in the world of missing children. There was no ransom, no public manhunt, no high-speed chase. Just one officer's quiet intuition that something wasn't quite right, and a girl who managed to hold on long enough to be found. For Emily's parents, Mark and Lisa Parker, the moment they saw their daughter again was both beautiful and heartbreaking. Lisa collapsed into her arms, sobbing uncontrollably. Mark stood frozen, staring at the girl who had been gone for nearly a month, but somehow looked like she had aged years. Emily barely spoke at first. Her embrace was tight, desperate. She didn't cry. Not until hours later, when she was finally alone with her mother, safe in a hospital room under soft blankets and dim lights. Physically, Emily was malnourished, dehydrated, and suffering from minor bruising and exhaustion. Mentally and emotionally, the damage was deeper. Trauma experts explained that she would need time, possibly years, to process what she had endured. She was referred to a trauma-focused therapist specializing in child victims of exploitation and abduction. Sessions were kept private, and for a while, so was Emily's location. Her parents withdrew her from school and began homeschooling temporarily while she healed. Law enforcement officers from 3 different states were invited to a closed-door debriefing, where they studied every detail of the case to improve future responses. Officer Daniel Hayes was praised by the media and his department as a local hero, though he remained humble. "I just did my job," he told reporters during a brief press conference. She saved herself the moment she lifted her head. Still, Hayes' name would be remembered. The Ashwood Police Department awarded him the Medal of Valor, and the community organized a small celebration in his honor. Parents approached him in grocery stores, shaking his hand, thanking him for what he'd done, not just for Emily, but for reminding everyone that vigilance still mattered. Meanwhile, the case against Richard Allen continued to grow. Federal prosecutors prepared what they called a wall of evidence. The digital files, chat transcripts, burner phone records, and surveillance footage painted an airtight picture of his guilt. A grand jury indicted him on 17 charges, including kidnapping, transportation of a minor across state lines for unlawful purposes, possession and production of illicit material involving a child, and obstruction of justice. Each charge carried decades of prison time. Richard pled not guilty, claiming everything that occurred was consensual and misunderstood. His defense attorney, assigned by the court, hinted at a mental health defense, but prosecutors were unmoved. "There is no misunderstanding here," the lead prosecutor stated. "This was not a romance. It was a calculated abduction of a child, and we will ensure he never does it again." Emily's story spurred broader conversations about online safety. School districts across Alabama and Kentucky organized seminars, to educate parents and children about internet predators. Cybersecurity experts appeared on national morning shows, warning of the evolving tactics used by child groomers. Lawmakers introduced new proposals aimed at holding social media and gaming platforms more accountable, especially when minors were involved. Emily's name became a symbol both of vulnerability and resilience. Her story wasn't just one of survival, it became a call to action. In a quiet interview conducted 6 months after her return, Emily spoke publicly for the first time. Sitting beside her mother, she looked stronger still, shy, but more grounded. She described Richard as to different people. One was the kind, funny guy online who made her feel safe. The other was the silent, angry man who wouldn't let her open the curtains or speak to strangers. He told me I was free, she said softly, but I never felt more trapped. When asked what she wished other kids knew, she replied, just because someone says they love you doesn't mean they do. And if you're scared to tell your parents, that's exactly when you should tell them. Emily began drawing again, something she used to love before she went missing. Her sketches became part of her healing process. One drawing, shared with her therapist's permission, showed a faceless girl standing on a dark road, a patrol car's headlights beaming in the distance. The caption underneath read, "He didn't see my face, but he heard my silence." In the months that followed, Emily's parents became advocates for missing children's initiatives. They spoke at conferences, partnered with nonprofits, and used their platform to help other families. They were open about their pain, their mistakes, and their recovery process. "We never thought it could happen to us," Mark admitted, "but it did, and the only thing worse than losing a child is thinking they might be out there, scared and alone." Officer Hayes, though offered a promotion, chose to stay in Ashwood. He resumed his regular patrols, keeping an eye on the same roads and same small town that had unknowingly crossed paths with a national case. "I think about Emily every time I stop a car now," he said. "You never know who's in the back seat." Richard Allen's trial date was set for the following spring, but even before the jury heard opening arguments, his fate seemed sealed. The evidence was overwhelming, and the public outcry left little room for sympathy. Emily Parker had been one of the lucky ones, but her story rooted in a simple mistake, a missed signal, and one officer's instinct was a reminder of how close darkness can lurk beneath the surface, and how sometimes, even in the quietest towns, justice still finds a way to shine.